Be patient with yourself while you are still trying. As you, the thing about life is really nobody knows what it is they're doing. We simply just try to figure it out as we go. The difference between someone who seems to have it all figured out and compared to someone who is struggling a lot is simply information. The information that you know is the reason why you are currently living the way that you're living, whether that's mentally, emotionally, spiritually, even financially, even physically. It's the information that you have believed that ultimately is shaping your life experiences. So in order for you to really break through that habit and or change your circumstances is you need new information. And in order, the thing I think that is often overlooked or really not discussed much is, unless you really, really seek the information, is you have to seek inspiration and learn from those individuals who are living lifestyles that you desire. For example, if you are depressed, you may not, if you are feeling depressed, it is simply because of something you believe. There is a form of mindset when you are feeling depressed. There is something within your mindset that tells you are feeling depressed, therefore you believe it, and then you dwell in your life experience, your life experiences or your life environment, and you feel depressed. But the difference, if you really want to get out of a depressive mindset, you really need to learn from those people who have been depressed and has overcame that depression. And in order to do that, for example, for me, great backstory about me. January 2020, I am very open about this. You can look at the history of my channel. I was on a psychiatric hold, and I went through a very dark, traumatic experience, as you can imagine. And within that experience was not the easiest thing to go through. Just turned 21. I have a progressive disability. My disability wasn't doing the greatest. Professionally, everything I was doing was failing, and even personally, my entire household was falling apart. It was a lot of things going on where it was becoming a lot to bear through. And as you can imagine, it led me, in a very dark, depressive state, so dark and severe where I actually needed medical intervention, where I was hospitalized and sedated for 4 days. And they ran tests and blood work, CT scans, and nothing was coming up. I wasn't schizophrenic. I didn't have anything going on other than simply the mental health battle that I was going through. And it became so overwhelming that I happened to break. That strong individual people had seen, for my entire life, happened to break. He wasn't as happy as people perceived him to be, and he happened to break. And I am okay sharing that. But the thing I learned, the reason why I'm sharing that with you is because that's me being in a very depressive state. In order for me to get through that, like, I am happy to say, again, I went through this in January 2020, right? And the process within these past 5 years, like at the time of this recording, it is currently 2025. And, within the past 5 years alone has not been the easiest thing. There's been a lot of trials, many more dark valleys that I had to endure through, and many things that, quite frankly, almost did break me again. So the reason why I'm sharing that with you is I was in a very dark, depressive state. How did I get through that? The number one thing that me being on a psychiatric hold experience that I think is one of the worst things you can do is, it was highly recommended by my psychiatrist at the time. At this time, at this time in January 2020, I was on psychiatric hold and on antidepressants, seeing a psychiatrist. And as I was going through this process, the number one thing that was recommended is getting into a support group. And I had two options. I can either do it virtually or I can do it in person. Me being at the mental state that I was in, I wasn't doing the greatest, and I happened to go in person. I gave it a try 2 times, and I don't even think I gave it a try 2 times. I think I just did it once. But anyhow, I went into the support group, and I'm surrounded by roughly 10 to 15 other people, maybe 20 max. And support group, and you're just like in a room. You're in a room, and with other people who are going through depressive experiences. And you're in the support group and people are sharing their life experiences. Like, hey, I'm just throwing out random names here. Hey, Emily, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm doing okay. They're messing with their fingers and they're looking down. And oh, I'm doing okay. I'm trying not to hurt myself. They said other words. I just don't know if this video will be demonetized, or get taken down. But they were using some profound words, negative words, and and I remember just sitting there. Again, I just went through a psychiatric hold. I'm in a very dark, depressive mindset. I'm not doing the greatest, and here I am surrounding myself. That was recommended, by other people in very depressive states. Hey, John, how are you doing? Everything's still the same. Nothing gets better. Home life isn't doing the greatest, and it's just depressive talk after depressive talk. And the conversation was just depressing. It's like you're in darkness and you get thrown into more darkness. And I was in there for about 30, maybe 45 minutes, an hour max. I want to say roughly it was more like 45 minutes. And I remember coming out, my mom's there, she was waiting for me, and she's like, hey, how did it go? And all I remember is I was like, this is not for me. And so I was like, I'm never coming here again. So I can't remember if my psychiatrist was there. I can't remember if it was my psychiatrist was there or if it was like someone that was like, I don't want to say the leader, but like the leader of the support group, and but anyhow, they ended up talking to my mom. They were like, oh, everything went well. They were like, did he share anything? And I kept to myself. The only thing in my thoughts was, why am I here? I shouldn't be here. Again, I'm already going through a very depressive state. The worst thing you should do is surround yourself with much more depressive people. That's like the worst thing that could possibly have happened. I remember coming out, they talked to my mom. My mom asked how everything went. They were like, oh, it went good. He didn't share anything. He just kept to himself. Yada, yada, yada. So we leave. I remember leaving, and I was like, Mom, I was like, this is not for me. And she was like, why? And I started telling her the conversations that were taking place, and she was like, oh, no. Like, we're not doing this. So she was on the same page with me, but I told her, I had to reassure her, which was not the easiest thing to do because as it was, like she just got done seeing her son break, like really, really break. She's seen a side that she didn't even know was there. You know what I mean? It was a very, very ugly side of me. Very, very ugly side of me. And, so I understood, if she wanted to fight, like push back a little bit, like, no, give it another try, Long story short, I remember coming home, and after that support group, I was like, you know what? I'm not taking these pills anymore. And as I'm taking these pills, they ask you, like, pick up your tongue, make sure, like, you swallow the antidepressants and things like that. And I told her, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to these support groups anymore. I'm not taking these medications anymore. Like, I was completely, everything that was highly recommended, I wanted to do the exact opposite. Meaning I didn't want to go to any form of support groups, whether virtually or in person, and I didn't want to take the medications that were prescribed for me. In my mind, there wasn't any visible indication that there was something wrong, other than he had a mental breakdown, which is a symbol that they give you to label what it is you're going through. Like there was no tumor going on. There was nothing other than, a young kid with a progressive disability going through having a progressive disability, going through hospitalizations for all of his life, and to be a college dropout, really having no sense of direction what to do. He happened to break. It happens to a lot of people, unfortunately. And as I was going through this experience, I told my mom, I was like, I'm not taking these pills no more. I'm not going to these support groups. I was like, I remember, a lot that happened within that moment. And I was like, I was very angry. So I snapped. And, I was like, because of you, I'm going through this. Like, you can't keep your mouth shut. And the reason why I said you can't keep your mouth shut is because while I was going through this experience, she would like say something else that I had said that would just like reinforce the doctors to want to do more. And, so I was like very angry, and I was like, because of you, I'm going through this. And I was like angry. I was frustrated. I was like breaking down, and, very ugly experience, not just for me, but, like think how she felt, you know what I mean? And, so when I approached her and I was like, hey, I'm not going to these support groups. I'm not taking these pills no more. Like, can you just give me one more shot? I promise you, I will not let you down. Like, I promise you. I was like, let me try to sleep without needing medication. Let me try to get through a day without needing medication. Let me try to get through a week. Let me just try. Please let me try. And I think we haven't talked about it, but I think it would be kind of cool to kind of document this process later. Maybe like when I release a certain future project of mine, and hopefully I have that opportunity, and we can document that process. I think it would be a pretty extraordinary, groundbreaking breakthrough documentary. And so me going through that was a very ugly experience, but think in terms of how she felt seeing her son go through that. And I think there was that ounce of faith that she had in me, whether it was like big or as small as a mustard seed. She had that faith, like, let me give my son another shot. And she happened to get onto the same page with me. I stopped going to the support groups. I stopped taking the medication. And when I had my follow-up appointment with my doctor, like 2 weeks later, after my mom agreed, like, okay, let me give you another shot. You say you're good. You look better. You look like you got a hold of yourself. Let's see how this goes. I'm going to trust you. And I remember we're in the room, we're just crying and stuff. And I apologized for everything and told her I'm sorry and I love her and all of that. And she trusted me. She gave me another shot. And, I had my follow-up appointment roughly like 2 weeks later with my psychiatrist. And during this experience, while I was, again, undergoing through all of this, my psychiatrist asked me, hey, how is everything? Oh, I'm doing good. I'm doing so much better. I'm sleeping better. I'm good. And I really was doing well. I really was doing good. And he was like, okay. And he was like, wow. He was like, well, since you're doing good, he was like, how about we up your medication? And I remember looking at my mom. Me and my mom looked at each other. Great doctor, phenomenal doctor. He was both a guardian angel and he was God sent, to say the very least. Because if it wasn't for him, God knows where I would have been. The psychiatrist that originally placed me on the psychiatric hold was not the greatest one. And I even question certain things, her ethics. I even question her ethics till this day. And that's another topic, another conversation for another day. But I have to be mindful too. You don't know the patience she had in the past, with where she ended up partaking in the actions that she did. So the psychiatrist that I had another psychiatrist who was like the chief or something. Pretty much he had a more authority to override my original psychiatrist's authority. There's another huge story behind that, and another topic for another day. And anyhow, so I remember having this conversation with the psychiatrist, who again was God sent, because he really did help me get through what I was going through, and he gave me a second chance. And during this conversation, he was like, "Hey, how are you feeling?" I was like, "I'm doing good." My mom agreed, and because I really was doing better. And he was like, "Okay." He was like, "Well, since you're doing well," he was like, "I'm thinking about upping your medication a little bit more, just to see how things go." Me and my mom looked at each other, and I was like, "Actually, that's why I'm here. I stopped taking the medication." And he looked at me. He was like, "Really?" Like, he was so astonished to hear me say that. And he looked at my mom, and my mom was like, yeah, like he really did stop taking his medication, and he really is doing better. And they had their after we had our talk, they had their talk, and you know, and she was just telling him how I really was doing better, and I really was improving, and he was just like astonished, like he never seen anything like that happen, especially so fast. And he started asking what I was doing, and I was like, I started surrounding myself with nature, started listening to uplifting music. I started to learn from positive influences. So back to what I was saying in the beginning of this video is if you are in a depressive state, you cannot surround yourself with depressive people. If you are in a depressive state, you need to surround yourself with people who have overcame those either the same experience or very familiar life experiences, depending how unique your story is. Like my story, very unique. It's very different. I was the only one in a wheelchair with a progressive disability, in the support group. So to kind of give you a visualization, how much I stood out and how different I felt. How much different my story was. A lot of people around me, yeah, we all have our story. We all have our stories, and we all go through different things. But when someone tells you you're depressed, and someone tells you you're depressed, and they keep reinforcing that you're depressed, do you really think you're going to break through that pattern? Of course not. So in order for you to break through that depressive state, surround yourself with positive influences. And if you are an individual who doesn't have the greatest, positive influences around you, you have the power to access the internet. If you can watch this video, you have so many tools and resources literally at the palm of your hands. And, if you don't have the opportunity or the privilege or resources, to surround yourself with positive influences, you have the ability to surround yourself with positive influences through the screen. I started to learn from Steve Harvey. Steve Harvey is one of the most inspirational people I have ever heard, seen, came across. His story alone, being homeless, getting to where he's at, not only that, but to see his transformation and to hear him talk about the positive messages that he does, motivational and inspirational talks, and Tony Robbins. Steve Harvey was like one of the primary people that I started to learn from in the very, very beginning. I still learn from him till this day. And I started to learn from people who either had a very similar experience as mine, such as being in a very depressive state, being in complete desperation, being surrounded by darkness, and going through a very trialing time that ultimately breaks their faith, that crushes them. I started to learn from those people, and I started to learn how their mindset works. I started to hear what they had to say on how to have the faith, continue to put one foot in front of the other, have faith that everything will be okay. And I started to hear stories, of people who went through the trenches and went through very dark, turbulent life paths and overcame them. And that is what created that spark of hope. It wasn't, being in a depressive state and surrounding yourself with other people in depressive states, but to put it simply, Martin Luther King said it best. He said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that." And for me, that light were positive influences. Everything that I was doing, I needed to do the exact contrary. Meaning, again, this is my story. Take this with a grain of salt. I don't know your story. I don't know your mental health journey. I don't know what your story looks like. But, so again, take this with a grain of salt, is if you are in a depressive state and, you ran tests and there's nothing there other than a label that a doctor or a medical professional gave you. You're bipolar, schizophrenia. Schizophrenia, I think there is some form of sign of that. But bipolar, for example, I think, forgive me for my ignorance, But bipolar to me is just one way of saying you don't have a way to control your emotions. And because they put that label on you, you believe it. And because you believe it, you get stuck in that mentality that you never will be able to control your emotions simply because there's a label on it. I believe that a lot of these labels we put on behind mental health is the reason why we get stuck feeling the way that we do. And in order to break through those mental health labels is to simply oftentimes do the exact contrary of what is being taught. My job, my goal that I really am going to take much more seriously and really try to be much more open. I know it's going to stir the pot a lot, quite a bit, but I think it's time for me to really talk about mental health and really talk about how to really get to that next step and help people with their mental health journey in the best way that I can. I know I cannot help everybody, but I can assure you I can definitely help many, many people. Not only by sharing my story, but sharing what I have learned because of my story. So for me to you is keep the faith. I know that's easier said than done, but I promise you that if you are going through a very dark, turbulent life path, keep the faith. That 1 ounce of faith can help you get through so much. Again, reflecting off of my mindset, picture this. This is literally what happened. I'm in the room. I'm crying. I'm scared. Chills all over my spine. I'm freaking out. I'm terrified. I'm angry. And I am lying in bed. I can't get up. I'm like a complete vegetable in bed. And I'm just laying there. Lights are off. I'm crying. I'm sobbing. I'm going through a lot. And, the negative thoughts were telling me, why are you doing this to me? Why do you keep doing this to me? Why do you put me through this? I hate you. And, I'm just lashing out. Not verbally, but internally, emotionally. And as, I was like letting this out, again, internally, there was like something I was like, hey, everything will be okay. And when my mind started to wander and drift more into that darkness, there was like that little whisper, not an actual voice. I want to be transparent as much as possible. Not an actual voice, but like that little whisper that we call a thought. Like, hey, everything is going to be okay. Hey. You're not alone. And God's light was that spark I needed to help me get through what I was going through. And I can assure you, in that moment, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if things were going to get better. I didn't know. But I had the faith that maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but I had the faith that one day everything will be okay. And it did. So for me to you, if you're going through a hard time, have faith. Because I promise you that ounce of faith can help you get through what you may think you cannot get through. I love you. I appreciate you. And remember, grow through what you go through. Much love.